And like I said, I mean, I think Street Fighter Five, is one of the more enjoyable Street Fighter games, and I mean, I like it better than some of the older Street Fighter games at this point. I mean,
Okay.
I like five more than I like four in retrospect at this point.
So, here I am with James Chen, the FGC commentator. I'm not sure how accurate this is because I don't know of the OG history, but at least in my eyes, one of the OG Street Fighter commentators. Definitely like one of the voices of the FGC when you think of it. So,
Yeah.
thanks for coming on, James. I'm excited
Yeah,
about this.
no problem, no problem.
So I guess to start out, are you actually like one of the OG voices? Because when you hear about like the early days, it's always like obviously a little bit messy, but sometimes it's like, oh, I might seem OG, but I'm actually second generation, or I'm third generation, but that's so
Well,
many years back, like it all seems the same.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, when you're talking about like voices, like in terms of commentary, yeah, I mean, I was one of the first major commentators for fighting games. That's not even really OG because that's Street Fighter 4 era. Street Fighter 4
Oh,
era
okay.
is very, very late in terms of the timeline of fighting games. Now, I was around and I was playing Street Fighter 2, the original World Warriors.
Oh,
So,
geez, nice.
it definitely was. I'm definitely OG, but not like I was around playing, but I wasn't like tournament competitive until much significantly later.
Okay.
So, I count other people as more OG than I am, even though I've been around since then and was
Yeah.
obsessed with Street Fighter, the original Street Fighter 2 anyway. But I guess I'm OG in terms of when I started, but in terms of like actual like competitiveness, it kind of came about a little bit later.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's always an interesting one with people like more established because it all esports is so fast. Like 1 year is
Right.
however many in traditional sports or whatever. I guess I want to start with Street Fighter, particularly the end of Street Fighter Five, because Street Fighter Six is obviously announced. We're in a very interesting time for
Hmm.
both Street Fighter Five, but also like the FGC, because this is almost an era shifting moment, kind of like with the
Hmm.
transition
Hmm.
from Street Fighter, Guilty Gear and KOF. There's all these rollback games coming in. Like, there's a
Yeah.
lot of interesting stuff happening all at once within a very small like period of time. So like
Hmm.
the ending of Street Fighter Five, what does it mean? Like, what is Street Fighter V's legacy, and what are we moving forward with?
I mean, I feel like Street Fighter V's legacy, it's such an interesting one because I mean, you know, oftentimes when I talk about Street Fighter Five, it's in a very negative light, right? And I just want to get established that I think Street Fighter Five, the way that it's ending right now, is one of the best Street Fighter games in a long time. Like I really think that Street Fighter Five has reached a stride that is just really, really solid. But Street Fighter Five, honestly, I think for Capcom might have its biggest legacy might actually have been almost kind of a like teach Capcom what not to do kind of situation.
Yeah,
I mean, when we talk about the launch, I mean, remember, they were trying something brand new, right? Every other
yeah,
version of Street Fighter had been Alpha 1, Alpha 2, Alpha 3. Here's Street Fighter 4, Super Street Fighter 4, Arcade Edition, Arcade Edition. Like they kept really, so they were doing new stuff, DLC, constant patches, and, they were really trying to find their way through it. I mean, even like the fight money thing really didn't kind of work out the way that I think that people originally thought it was going to work out, et cetera, et cetera. But honestly, the launch of the game was definitely very rocky. No extra
yeah.
modes in there. No, I mean, like if
I
you look at
remember in
Street
high
Fighter,
school, like just all the videos of like Street Fighter Five could be a good game, but like it was too geared to esports. There's no like meat on the bone and all that
yeah.
stuff. So definitely a rough launch.
And you compare that to Street Fighter 6, it's like they're like, okay, we got it.
Yeah,
Sorry, here's 1,000 billion one-player content stuff here. But then also, Street Fighter 5, I've often said, was probably one of the catalysts for anti-rollback people in the first place because their
really.
rollback was kind of messed up, right? I mean, a lot of people were like, oh my gosh, there's actually anti-rollback people out there. And I think Street Fighter V was kind of a reason for that. And then when Strive came out and everyone's like, oh,
I didn't even realize Street Fighter V had rollback netcode. I thought they just had delay based. Like,
no, it's
really,
it's been rollback this whole time. Yeah. And,
wow.
And that's the thing, right? I mean, the rollback when programmed correctly is extremely efficient. Street Fighter V's problem, that's why you get the jumpy. That's why you get a lot of the choppiness when you're playing online, because in delay-based netcode that wouldn't happen. In rollback netcode, what it's doing is it's rolling back and going, oh, this is actually what the state of is supposed to be, so it snaps it into reality basically. But if two players get desynced, then one person keeps getting like updated and the other person's just fine. And so that's what we were seeing a lot of in Street Fighter V. Okay. And so like Japanese players, they were always just playing on delay-based netcode just fine. But even when Strive came out, Japanese players were like, this is what rollback's about? Oh my gosh, this is amazing, kind of thing. And so, Street Fighter, and then, Street Fighter V also, they just did a lot of things. And towards the end of the game, they really kind of let the game flourish a little bit more. They started getting more creative. They even started trying to add a lot more visual, basically like eye candy kind of stuff into the game a little bit. Like moves would cause a little bit more zoom in, more screen shakes and stuff like that. Because early on, Street Fighter V presentation wise was also very bare bones, where you see something like Tekken 7, they went into these zoom in counter hits, the slow motion, the black and white trades, like they really focused on the presentation, and Street Fighter V kind of left that behind at first. And so during that growth process, and the biggest thing was that Street Fighter V was designed as a game to exist as not Street Fighter 4. So the original Street Fighter V was designed because people were like, I hate this in 4, I hate this in 4. So they're like, all right, we're going to make a Street Fighter game that takes away everything that you hate in Street Fighter 4.
It was like a response. So does that kind of make Street Fighter 6 a response to a response in a sense? Because you look at it and it's like oozing that style. It's like bringing... I haven't played Street Fighter 4, and I didn't touch Street Fighter 5 that much. So mechanics-wise, I'm not going to like pretend to know something I don't. But like it almost seems like Drive Rush is almost coming back to the Ultra combo in a little bit of... Correct me if I'm wrong.
I mean, the best way to put it, honestly, is that no, Street Fighter 6 is not a reaction to Street Fighter 5, which is good. They seem to be trying to create their own vision. I mean, the whole drive gauge is just completely brand new and really just kind of a very unique kind of thing. Exhaustion is really unique, and that's the important thing. So when Street Fighter 5 came out, it was more just kind of like let's try to take away the things that were wrong with 4. But I don't think that they had a true vision of where the game was going to go. As the game started developing through the years, though, the developers really started getting an idea of what the game was about and why now, towards the end, it is in such a solid state. And like I said, I mean, I think Street Fighter V, is one of the more enjoyable Street Fighter games. And I mean, I like it better than some of the older Street Fighter games at this point. I mean, I like 5 more than I like 4 in retrospect at this point, and I know a lot of the 4 fans are going to be mad at me. I'm sorry. But, again, but I think they learned a lot of important things, and a lot of that is applying to 6, not as a way of like, what is it? Rise of Skywalker kind of like apology for an apology kind of thing. It's more just like, okay, I see. We need to have a distinct vision for our game from the get-go. This is what we want to do, and I think they're doing a good job at that so far.
Cool. And so that's Street Fighter, which is obviously a game you commentate in, but you also commentate in others like Guilty Gear, for instance.
Yeah.
How is the transition like because fighting games are very different than like other esports. So if you tried to commentate Valorant and CS:GO the same, it just wouldn't work. Like some fundamentals would transfer over, but
Right.
like they are distinctly different. Is there that same challenge with fighting games? Because Street Fighter and Guilty Gear, presentation wise, very different. Like mechanic wise,
Right.
is there that same challenge?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, I learned that very early on with Marvel versus Capcom 3.
Oh, that's,
Playing commentating Street Fighter 4 was like, oh yeah, okay. Oh, I'm pretty sure what he was trying to do here was bait out this DP because the last time and then Marvel, you're like, oh, what he was, and then something else has happened. You're like, what? Oh, huh? Then, huh? Okay, like different games definitely require different kind of paces. You can't do as much analysis on a Marvel game because it's just too fast, right?
yeah.
There's plenty of analysis to give, but the game is just too fast. Like you cannot take the time to do that. And then, of course, every fighting game has different mentality, different strategies, right? As a commentator, you do want to break down a lot of the fighting games in the very similar way, the fundamentals as you were talking about, right? For example, in Street Fighter 5, the core mix-up of Street Fighter 5 is the attack throw shimmy mix-up. And so if you commentate this game, you have to understand what that core mix-up is
Okay.
in order to commentate it properly. Otherwise you're not going to be noticing the right things. In KOF, the core mix-up really is if you watch a Dandy J video, he calls it the KOF zone, which is this short hop, regular jump, dash up, poke at the short hop range. Most of the characters kind of follow along this kind of neutral.
Okay.
And if you don't understand that about KOF, you're going to miss a lot of the things what the players are trying to go for and stuff. So,
Yeah.
Tekken, for example, the mix-ups is basically mids are good launchers, but they're usually punishable. Highs are safer, but you could duck under them. And lows generally don't do a lot of damage, and you're just supposed to kind of eat a lot of lows, kind of things like that. And so if you don't understand the core mix-ups between the different games, you can't commentate it. Just you can narrate it, oh, he got a hit, but if you really want to dive deep, and I've commentated fighting games that I don't really know before, and I can kind of get away with it with those kind of like fundamentals, but those are not games that I'm like seriously trying to learn. And
Yeah.
for things like Strive and Street Fighter, the ones that I really want to commentate and do a good job on, and just like these are the games that really, I want to be known for. Yeah, you got to do the studying. You got to know the characters, and you got to know what the general strategy is for the game overall.
Yeah, just having that like basic fundamental knowledge of the at least a few layers deep, so that you can actually talk about the interactions and the adaptations.
Yeah, and also honestly, it helps so much to actually play the game, because then as you're getting hit by stuff and you start realizing what's going on, you gain a lot more insight into what's actually happening.
I found that myself in Siege when I was an analyst. I felt the best in the work I was doing for my team, like directly after I had to stop playing, because I was still in that player mentality of, okay, I know exactly what's going on in this situation. This is the pressure they're feeling. This is the expected like response from the attack,
Yes.
and this is their expected response on the defense. And how they're not doing that is important, because that's why it works. And all those
Right,
layers
yeah,
only
exactly.
worked because I was still in that mentality. Now it's a lot
Yes.
harder because I'm not playing at that same level anymore. I'm washed, sadly.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm kind of washed in fighting games too, but I've been playing I mean, obviously, like I said, since Street Fighter 2,
Yeah.
2 decades now of playing fighting games. So needless to say, it's kind of second nature a lot
Yeah.
for me at this
Well,
point.
actually, I want to ask, because I've seen all the like educational content you make. Does trying to like break it down for a beginner to intermediate level, does that help keep you up on your game as well? Like,
Yeah, actually. I mean, the old adage is you never really learn something unless you can teach it to somebody else, right? And I mean, for me, when I do try to teach it, I mean, like, I've done first attack content is what educational series has been called, and I have gone through like 7 different, like, maybe not 7, but like 3 or 4 different iterations of rebooting and starting over and trying to explain it again in a new different style, because there really is no blueprint for teaching fighting games. Like,
Yeah.
we're making it up. So we are the people making the blueprints. And so, yeah, dude, years and years and years of me trying to reassess how to present fighting games. And I mean, I think I've got a pretty good grasp on it. And I think the latest first attack series I did was okay. My biggest problem is I'm just too damn wordy, and all my videos ended up being an hour long, and nobody wants to sit down and watch hour videos on YouTube these days. So
Yeah,
now I need to figure out. I need to figure out how to make them shorter. That's
yeah,
the new thing I got to learn.
was talking with Krakatoa from Dustloop about that and his
Yeah.
content creation process, and he said the videos force me to stay short because otherwise I would talk for ages and ages and ages, and
Yep.
like using the videos and having to edit them forced me to do that. So it's interesting to hear like you're in the same boat, and I'm pretty sure when I tried making video essays, same boat as well. So I think it's just a problem of the medium.
Let's put it this way. One of the first things that I did to educate people was write FAQs, right? Like, that used to exist on GameFAQs.com and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Might be before your time.
It was same. It came up with Krakatoa, same deal.
Yeah. And my FAQs were very popular and very famous for being like 200 pages, right? Like, my CVS2 guide is literally in Word, like at 10-point font, like over 200 pages long.
Jeez.
And back in the day, that was considered strength. That was considered like, oh God, this is the Bible. All my information here. This is great. So the more you stuffed into it, the better it was. And that's how I've always operated. And now in the YouTube age, it's like the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And it's so hard for me to shake that now.
Yeah. So, I kind of want to transition because I thought it would be an interesting question to ask. We see like gradual shifts in the way fighting games are played and designed. There's the whole discussion about fighting games going easier. We don't have half circle motions anymore in Guilty Gear. We have like quarter circle, and like Project L is rumored to be one button specials and all that stuff. But I want to talk slightly more meta. Are we seeing archetype shifts as well? Like, has the traditional zoner changed from the Street Fighter 2 days to like the Street Fighter 5 and soon to be Street Fighter 6 days? Like, has the Axel matchup changed from like plus R to Strive? I don't know how much plus R you've played, but just for example's sake.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, yes, a lot. I mean, honestly, zoners used to be way more annoying than they are in most fighting games these days. And, again, they never dominated a lot of the games that they were in. So it's not like they were broken. It's just that, there is this mindset. Unfortunately, one of the difficult things about fighting games is, when Street Fighter 2 was out, and this is the big advantage of the earlier games having these kind of archetypes, there wasn't really much competition. And I'm not even talking about fighting games. I'm just talking about video games or things to do, hobbies, right? And that's the thing is, so in Street Fighter 2, like, Guile was the best character in original World Warrior, and he's a zoner of epic proportions. Like, I mean, that was like, you want to talk zoning back in the day. Guile in Street Fighter 2 World Warrior was like one of the most difficult zoners to crack, like, period. Such a pain to fight him. But that's the thing is, like, that was the only fighting game. So
you
learn to play, that's what you learn to do, is you learn to fight it, right? And these days it's just like, I fight against a good zoning guy, and you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm gonna go play another video game.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go play another fighting game. So it's a lot. There's a lot more that I'm gonna go read a book. I'm gonna go outside and hike. Like, there's so many things for people to do these days that is not playing the game. And so, it's hard for the devs, because they could make these great zoner characters. You know, look at the NRS games, for example. Injustice 1, Mortal Kombat 10, Injustice 2. They were known for having some of the most brutal zoners in all of fighting games. Like, NRS was not bashful about making zoners, especially like in the Injustice series. And then you go to MK11, and all the zoners disappeared. There's only one real true zoner left in Cetrion, and everybody hates Cetrion. And everyone kind of considers her the best character in the game. I mean, she's really good, but people also hate fighting her and all this stuff. And so, you have really seen a disappearance in zoning. I mean, Dalsum is another one of those classic zoning characters, and in Street Fighter V, he probably has the best rush down in the game. Like, Dalsum is just like ridiculous offense, you know, and it's like, wait, what?
I've seen so much Dalsum hate from Brutus's Twitter timeline.
Yeah, as Zangief players, yes.
I feel like he's got a right to the chip on his shoulder, but it's funny to see.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm a Zangief player too at heart, and so trust me, I know exactly. I've been dealing with Dalsum my whole life here. So when they put Necro in Street Fighter 3, I was so angry. But like, yeah, even if you look at Guilty Gear, Axel, probably really the only like true zoner in Guilty Gear Strive right now. You know, there's other characters with zoner qualities, but most characters kind of rush you down and blow you up, right? Most of them profit from getting you in the corner and blowing you up. So again, Guilty Gear, another game that was known for having some brutal zoners in the game, doesn't seem to be there that much anymore. And in fact, you know, on the opposite end of the zoner list is grapplers. There is a lot of grappler hate out there. And so, you don't see the grapplers playing in the particularly same archetype as much either. And which is why, to be honest with you, I love DNF Duel so much, because they definitely threw in some crazy zoners, although they're not that strong. But there's a lot of like good variety of archetype in that game. So.
Yeah, well, when you throw everything to 11, I guess like even the zoners get to have their fun too. So I remember having a lot of fun with shenanigans with Grappler, just, you know, take a few shots of tequila and just go, I'm going to armor through this one too. I actually did have an interesting question though, because at least back to FPSs, there's almost like this circular way the meta works where you'll have the rise of like a super tactical team. Like in Counter-Strike, the big example is 2018 Astralis, for like, we have a contingency for everything, no matter what situation we're in. We have an idea of what to do and how to get the most out of every piece of utility we have. And then kind of when they fell off, the immediate follow-up team was Team Liquid, who's the American, we're just going to run and gun, and you know what? I'm feeling the vibe, so I'm going to buy a Deeg this round, and I'm just going to swing that dude, I'm going to headshot him, and I'm going to keep going. We don't got, we use our utility horribly, but we just outskill you, and there's like this kind of cycle, and we're kind of going back to the utility cycle, at least in CSGO. Is there that kind of cycle in fighting games, or is it different because of character archetypes and all that stuff?
Yeah, the character variety usually drives it more than anything. Like I said, for the most part, you know, Street Fighter V, when the game first came out, people were trying to play it like Street Fighter 4. And, you know, collectively, I mean, it worked because everyone was doing it. But as the game got more and more figured out, you know, people really started discovering, like I said, the throw, strike, shimmy meta, you know, of the game, the core strategy of the game. But once that got established, it kind of stayed that way for a lot. Now, they've done a lot to improve the game in terms of like having more neutral and stuff, but your goal is to put the opponent into that kind of mix-up situation, right? How you get there via neutral depends on the character, but the characters do drive the meta a lot more. And in fact, you know, what you see a lot in fighting games is the cycles and the trends tend to be which characters are the most popular. So like during the middle of Street Fighter V, Karin and Cammy kept alternating between who was better. And you would see a lot of these players just shift between them, whichever was stronger. And now currently Luke is like the easiest character to be very strong at. So you see a ton of Luke players out there now, right? So,
Yeah.
and again, the meta for fighting games tends to follow characters a little more so than it does like changes because that's the thing. People have gotten so good at fighting games, and there's just so much information, training modes, things that we didn't have back in the arcade days and
Yeah.
such, that people can figure a lot about fighting games really, really quickly. And because all the characters are so vastly different, we figure out what the general strategy for the game is, and then through the characters you get the refinement. And so that's where a lot of the cycle comes from in fighting games.
Okay, cool. And so I guess hold on, let me find it. I had a there we go. I had a good question about this. I
Yeah,
planned.
no worries.
So I guess that raises a question. Do you think, in that sense, if it's more character defined of like who is the easiest character to be good at, does that kind of take away from, at least from an outside perspective, the old, not old is relative. The old FGC where it's like you just deal with a sucky matchup or whatever, and you eventually lab your way to a solution. Like thinking back to that BBCF, like Noel tech that's a month or 3 old, where the game's been out for however many years, but they finally found this tech, and it like helps bring Noel a low tier to a mid tier. But then in modern games, it's like more patch based. Do you think we've lost a little bit of that like adventurous spirit to find the solution just because next patch will get it?
uh yes and no.
Okay.
So there are a lot of low tier heroes out there that just will not leave the characters, and a lot of that is loyalty. That I used to pick low tier because I just wanted to prove that I could beat you with the worst character in the game, right? And
Yeah.
that was fun. And then you always had the option select of, if you lose, well, my character sucks. So there's always that thing. And so for games like Street Fighter V, there are characters who are not considered the best, but you'll just have these people try to keep playing them. And the other thing too is that patches are so erratic that a lot of the times you can't sit down and just trust the devs to fix it. Like the Alex and the Ryu players had been hoping for Ryu and Alex patches for the entire life cycle of Street Fighter V, and although they would get little buffs, it was never enough to really make a difference until finally the very last patch, like 6 years later. So there is a lot of players out there who don't who will keep playing low tier, not necessarily hope like I play Lucia. I don't think she's that strong. She's good, don't get me wrong. No one's bad in Street Fighter V except Zangief. And like I would always hope for cool new buffs during the patch, but I would never rely on it. You know what I mean? I'm not like, here, okay, next patch, I'm good. It was just like, next patch, they'll probably give me more tools that I didn't really ask for, kind of a situation. But the other thing too is, so back in the day, a lot of the low tier heroes, like especially in games like Third Strike and MVC2 and Super Turbo, these games like that, you get players who are amazing with low tier characters. I love playing Cammy in Super Turbo, and she's like de facto the worst character in that game, but I can win some difficult matches because I've taken the time. The thing about it is, I wouldn't say the patch culture has changed it as much as the esports culture has changed it. Because, like, for example, Street Fighter V Season 1, Xian, who is one of the best players from Singapore, really loved Fang. Fang sucked in Season 1. And this is the thing, is like, you're playing in these tournaments, and there's a lot of money on the line, and there's also like the seeding points to get into Capcom Cup, and the grand prize of Capcom Cup is like $250,000, which for fighting game players is stupid amounts of money.
That's
right?
a lot.
We don't make that kind of money, in fighting games. And so like literally life-changing money. And so there's no impetus for someone like Xian to try to make it work with that character, especially he is an Evo champion. He's clearly good enough to be in the upper echelon of all fighting games. There's just so little motivation and reason for him to stick out with a bad character like that. You know what I
Okay.
mean?
Yeah.
And so I would say the esports culture has changed it more than anything because, you know, even in ST these days, like they're like one of the US players, a guy named Silent Scope, he's taken up the mantle of Cammy and Super Turbo. It's because there's not a lot of money on the line here. You know, it's like I'm gonna play this crappy character because it's about fun and you know, just I like the character. But you know, even if we went back to Super Turbo, like people are used to a Third Strike, right? I mean, there
Yeah.
are some god awful characters in Third Strike, but people will play them.
Yeah.
Soon as you start throwing $100,000 on the line, oh boy, you would definitely expect to see people stop playing those characters and to have people start complaining about how bad their characters are a lot more.
Yeah. So that does raise a question, though. That's like for the low tier. What about the high tier, though? Like, Happy Chaos is that easy, like, example there, where it's like, is there even a way to lab that out? Or is there just, you gotta suffer until a patch, like, hopefully smites him down from the heavens?
I mean, it depends on the game. Like right now, the most egregious example of this is Cronin in King of Fighters 15.
Yeah.
Like this character is, I mean, if he's not on your team, you're wrong. Like especially in a team game, right? So in a game like Guilty Gear, Happy Chaos is admittedly very difficult to use, but also, you know, if you really, really, really like Potemkin, you're just gonna play Potemkin.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, Godspeed to you because Potemkin's awful right now.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, exactly. But in King of Fighters, if you really, really, really love, like, let's just say Rio or Robert, it's a team game, so you put Cronin on the team anyway.
so you just have the room to make it work.
And so, yeah, I mean, a lot of the times you kind of do just have to hope that, or you just learn to fight them and just learn to deal with it, right?
Yeah.
The fortunate thing about Happy Chaos is there's not a ton of them, although I think the Happy Chaos army is growing because, like I said, Happy Chaos is not an easy character to use, but once used correctly, just absolutely, you know, I mean, the new patch came out. I'm not sure exactly how strong Happy Chaos is right now.
Yeah.
But honestly, like with characters like Cronin, yeah, you either just learn to just fight him and be okay with it, or yeah,
can't beat him, join him.
Wait for, yeah, can't beat him, join him, or just wait, you know, hopefully for the patch lords to come down from the heavens and smite him, kind of thing, you know. And so,
yeah,
I mean, they just released the new patch notes for KO at 15.
Yeah, I was scrolling through those with a friend.
Yeah, I don't think Cronin was deleted, but I think he was weakened, and we'll see how it pans out when it comes out in 4 days.
Yeah. Okay, so to close out, I wanted to kind of talk about the FGC in a post-COVID world, because for like CSGO and a lot of the like big esports, completely changed landscape, and the FGC a lot more grassroots, a lot less corporate in a lot of ways, for better and for worse, which, you know, some people don't like that part, but you know, obviously more grassroots and a lot more community driven.
Right.
How does the FGC look in a post-COVID world?
I mean, the most important thing that COVID really did, I mean, the silver lining of COVID really is the proliferation of rollback netcode. Because you look at what happened with the fighting games during the pandemic. Grand Blue Fantasy Versus was just been released before the pandemic, and everybody was talking about how this was going to be like one of the next big things because it's got a big, you know, company behind it with a lot of money. It was simple, so people could learn it, but complex at the same time. It was beautiful, etc., etc. Then the pandemic hit. Grand Blue Fantasy Versus has delay-based netcode, and basically Grand Blue Fantasy Versus kind of
Died.
like it fizzled, right? I mean,
Yeah.
obviously there's a great community out there that still plays it, but man, like did
Got
it,
kneecapped.
yes, it definitely got kneecapped the most out of every fighting game. Like you could talk about some other games like Soul Calibur 6, but people were already complaining about the netcode long before the pandemic,
Yeah.
and what happened was that, Dragon Ball Fighters, didn't have the rollback netcode. Then Strive came out and it was just like, oh, this is very important. And in fact, Strive in the first beta was delay based netcode because they only switched to rollback because of how much everybody said it was one of the most important things in all the public surveys that they took at events and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
so they actually went and retrofitted the game with the rollback netcode, and it came out and it's the best selling Guilty Gear, and everybody was talking about it. It got KOF to pivot. They've actually admitted that they were delay based netcode at first and they had to change the rollback. And now Arxis is just like Oprah with rollback, right? Rollback for you, rollback for you.
Yeah.
I mean, they're bringing it to Dragon Ball Fighters, they're bringing it to Exer, they've already brought it back to all their old games, and Samurai Showdown. SNK is now trying to put rollback in Samurai Showdown. So the pandemic, the biggest benefit is that it really has changed the culture of the FGC because, I often make this comparison. When we went from arcade to console, there was a lot of like, oh, you console players don't know what it's really like. You aren't real players. Like it's all about, if you can't win in the arcade, it doesn't count, kind of thing. And there was a long time that was offline versus online, right? Like, oh, you know what? If you're playing in this lag environment, whatever, you suck, whatever.
Yeah,
And
the
now,
old
thanks
you're
to
an onliner deal. That's kind of eternal across every game.
and now, because of a lot of the recent discoveries of PC fighting games having better refresh rates and overclocking your controllers and doing all these things to improve, now actually there's people who could be like losing in an offline match and be like, man, see me online when I can actually play in an optimal environment. And honestly, that's what rollback has brought for us, is that we have that ability. And I've talked about this in a lot of with a lot of other people, but if you look at Strive, for example, Guilty Gear Strive is the best example of this. Japan has always been dominant in almost every fighting game because they have the culture. You just go in the arcades and you play, and you have best players, and sure, they're across the country. There's East versus West Japan and stuff, but
it's a small country.
Yeah, I live in California. California is as big as Japan, almost. Is it? I gotta look up the area difference now. But I remember a long time ago on the news group days, someone was like, man, Vi and John Choi are so lucky because they both live in California and they get to play each other all the time. I'm like, dude, it takes 6 hours to drive between, But if you look at Strive now, because of rollback netcode, the best players out there are playing each other all the time. And what you're seeing now is that the US is actually one of the, if not the strongest in Strive right now, with players like Umisho, blowing everybody up with Happy Chaos and stuff. And that's one of the things that, the pandemic has brought for us, is the proliferation of rollback netcode and the culture of online fighting games, Discord fighting games, and labbing with friends and stuff like that. It's like the arcade culture, because you would go to the arcade and play your friends all the time, but now your friends could be anywhere in the country. And it's such a powerful tool that if anybody out there at this point in time is like, oh, these guys are online fighting game players, wait till they're just wrong. They're just wrong, because we have way too much evidence right now that the people who are good at online are the same people winning offline, because the online is so much better. And honestly, online before rollback has always been, for fighting games, just kind of like a kind of thing, like we would never take it serious because we're peer-to-peer, right? I mean, that's the thing, like with CSGO and all that stuff like that, you're always talking to the server. And so, if your connection's good, you had a good time. if someone in there was connection was bad, they suffered.
Yeah,
But
but in
man, let me
fighting
tell you,
games,
yeah,
it's
in
just like
fighting
both
games,
of you suffer for one person's bad connection. And I think also
yeah.
just the fact like somebody like Ending Walker, which we didn't get to get talk to too much, but like their success, they were
Hmm.
kind of seen as, at least from my understanding, they were seen as an onliner until they won like what their second event they ever played in person,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like that's Street Fighter. That's not even the good rollback if you want to go that far. So
Hmm.
at what point do you have to say, you know what, maybe the onliner is just good at the
Yeah.
game?
I mean, Umi Show was the other example of that, right? Umi Show was only online. Combo Breaker was her first event. She got second place in that event, beating a bunch of good players. And then she won Evo, which
Yeah,
was the largest Guilty Gear Strive tournament ever. Now granted, there wasn't as many foreign players at either of those events, but still, I mean, she was beating veterans and all the other newcomers, alike. So, you know, uh, Umi Show and Ending Walker are like the two premier examples of these online players coming in and showing their stuff. And to be fair, that player kind of existed before. I mean, if you look in the past, even with Exert, with bad delay based netcode, Lost Soul was exactly that kind of player. Eventually got third place at Evo, like highest ranking American player in Exert ever, at Evo. And but that was even when online was bad. So the inkling was there that showed you that a lot of online play can make you a strong player. Even Punk is a good example of that. When
that's
he
true.
first showed up in Street Fighter 5, he was just an online warrior in 4 and 5, and then he just burst onto the scene. So online definitely got a lot of bad rap and a lot discredited a lot, because it was very easy to discredit because the experience was extremely not optimal at all.
Yeah.
But the amount of knowledge and experience you gain from playing online is unparalleled. You cannot get that kind of experience in any other environment, even if you have an awesome local arcade, because you can still only play the people local to you. But now it's just like, I want to learn how to fight this character. Let me go talk to the best Axel player who lives in California, and we'll play anyway, even
Yeah.
though I'm East Coast.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess this has been a great talk, but I don't want to keep you too long because we're running on.
No
Oh my
worries.
God, 40 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, these kind of things, like I said, I could talk about this shit forever, and you can tell I love talking about it because,
Yeah.
again, fighting games are my passion, and as a historian, I like to talk about this kind of stuff. So no worries.
Yeah. Well,
No worries at all.
yeah. Well, maybe we'll get a part two or something. Who knows? But
Yeah.
just to close out for this one, is there anything you'd like to close out with? Any messages to anyone?
Usually, when people ask me this, in terms of fighting games, and it's tough because, I often say fighting games, if you want to learn fighting games, they're really, really, really hard to learn. And, one of the conversations that I always get into with, players from other esports is they're like, whatever, man, you've never played FPSs or MOBAs or
Oh
whatever.
my.
They're just as hard and da 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 da. And I'm like, yes, you're right. To get to the point where you are one of the best in anything is going to take as much dedication. But fighting games are a solo effort, and there's such little information out there to help you become very good. And the online modes, you just sit there and look at your rank go up and down, mostly down probably, and you're just
Yeah.
like, ugh, why am I even, I could be doing something else, man. Like, I could
Yeah.
be enjoying myself. Fighting games are a very, very tough genre to get into, very hard road for yourself. They force you to look deep within yourself, and a lot of times, because again, one of the greatest things about fighting games, and for a lot of games as well, but like, if you're using poison and you can't get out of like gold rank, for example, Inom's not using a different poison than you are. Inom is using the exact same poison you are, and he's winning every tournament he's in and getting second place at Evo. So like,
Yeah.
like literally the fault is with you. And
There's
it's
no
hard.
crosshair sensitivity to change this time.
Yeah, there's no
It's
no
a very
leveling,
brutal. Yeah,
no better gear.
yeah.
and
There's no like escape. The
right.
mirror's right next to you.
Yeah, but the main thing that the reason why I point this out, because a lot of people are like, "Stop it, James! Stop scaring people from playing fighting games." Da, 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 da. But the reason why I mention this all the time is because once you get to that point, though, once you start figuring it out and the game starts making sense to you, you will not find a better sense of reward than fighting games. I mean, honestly, once it starts clicking and that first match you play where you're like, oh my God, for some reason I know everything my opponent's going to do. This is sick, you know?
Yeah, the magical
It is what
moment.
yeah, it's one of the there are so many light bulb moments in fighting games. And as you go, you're like, I figured out fighting games. And then a month later, you're like, holy crap, I was wrong. Now I figured out fighting games. And then you just keep doing that. It is absolutely one of the most rewarding experiences that you will ever have. So if it may seem discouraging at first, but if it is something that you want to try to get good at, I definitely encourage you to, stick through it and hit me up. I'm definitely down to help teach people. There's a lot of people, Brian F, Say Jam, there's a lot, Zaffarino, there's a lot of good teachers out there. So don't give up.